Ever pushed a 57 Chevy up to top speed? Ever played some backseat bingo at a local drive-in movie theater? Ever done the twist of a sock hop? If so, you probably grew up in the 1950s. Or if you're like most people watching this right now, you simply wish you had. There's no doubt that the teens of the 1950s had the best time. From the classic cars to the vintage fashion to the movies and music. And don't forget to stick around to the end, because we're going to cover some of the most far-out slang terms from the decade that gave us both dig it and hipster. Music. The 1950s marked the beginning of a significant cultural shift, especially among teenagers who started to forge their own identities distinct from their elders. One of the ways they did this was to rebel in the form of music. The 50s saw the rise of rock and roll, a genre that quickly captured the imagination of American youth. In fact, icons like Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and Buddy Holly became the voices of a new generation despite being viewed as controversial by the older, more conservative crowd. Whatever your style, music was a major part of daily life, with phonographs and jukeboxes playing the latest hits, while Dick Clark's American Bandstand helped popularize endless songs about love, fast cars, and the brand new teenage experience. On the other side of the spectrum, pop music artists like Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole reflected the more romantic, emotional aspects of teenage life. Sock hops and school dances. Kids still love to dance today. It's just that dancing is for the likes and followers. But back in the 50s, the must-attend event for any teen was the sock hop. These informal dances were typically held in gymnasiums or cafeterias, where teenagers danced in their socks to protect the varnished floors. Music at these events was often played from vinyl records, but occasionally DJs or even live bands would perform. The term sock hop became synonymous with the 1950s and early rock and roll culture, immortalized by songs like At the Hop by Danny and the Juniors. However, the advent of sneakers and other indoor footwear soon saw the socks replaced, even if the dancing remained. 1950s fashion. The emergence of rock and roll was closely tied to changes in fashion and attitudes, with teenagers often embracing much more rebellious styles. All while these looks would barely catch a glance today, they had many parents and grandparents clutching their pearls. Generally, 1950s teen fashion was divided into two styles: conservative and rebellious. Girls typically wore long skirts and blouses, with skirts either being full or swingy or straight and pencil-like. Meanwhile, teenage boys embraced a more relaxed and plain image, characterized by jeans, white socks, and polos. However, the more rebellious boys and girls donned black leather jackets, short skirts, and greaseback hairstyles. Of course, the media of the time played a significant role in shaping these trends, with movies, television, and music driving the popularity of everything from poodle skirts to saddle shoes to Letterman jackets. Movies. Kids still like movies, only today they're mostly watching superhero flicks on their big screen or iPad. Back in the 50s, movies were not only new and exciting, but filmmakers were eager to cash in on this new market called teenagers. In fact, the 1950s are still considered the golden age for teenage cinema, with a drive-in theater becoming a popular destination for teens looking for fast and furious entertainment. In fact, the franchise we now know so well today is actually from a 1950s film. During this era, Hollywood studios began producing films specifically targeted at young audiences, often featuring themes of rebellion and teenage angst. James Dean, often referred to as the first American teenager, became an icon with his roles in films like Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden, which resonated deeply with the teenage experience. Movies about rebellion, such as The Wild One starring Marlon Brando, also captivated teens. Of course, it was nostalgia for this era that inspired later period films like Back to the Future, American Graffiti, Grease, and Hairspray. Drive-ins. And where did teens go to watch those new movies? Drive-ins, of course. Drive-in theaters were a hallmark of 1950s American culture, offering loads more flexibility than traditional theaters, allowing patrons to bring babies, smoke, and enjoy snacks in their vehicles. Drive-ins became known for showing B-movies, often horror or monster films, and developed a reputation as passion pits where teens could make out. At their peak, there were over 4,000 drive-in theaters across the United States, making them a quintessential part of American car culture. Today, while fewer drive-ins remain, they still evoke nostalgia for the carefree days of the 1950s. Television. Just like today, television was integral to 1950s American culture. In fact, affordability to new models allowed TV to become a dominant medium in the 1950s, challenging Hollywood's supremacy and transforming American entertainment. By 1955, half of all American homes had a television, bringing in shows like Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best, and The Ed Sullivan Show into living rooms across the nation. These programs often depicted idealized images of suburban family life, reinforcing values of individualism and family unity. Westerns and children's programming also gained popularity, contributing to a shared cultural experience among viewers in a way that simply didn't exist before. Teenagers being teenagers, they love shows like American Bandstand, which showcase popular music and dancing in a more exciting visual format. Dating. Dating as a concept seems like it goes back 1,000 years, but it really started in the 1950s. Before then, calling on a girl was the preferred method of meeting a mate, and it was much more formal, and usually involving parlors and pianos. By the 1950s, teens had a lot more freedom, but dating was still a pretty structured process, with clear stages leading from casual dating to serious relationships. Teenagers often started with double dates, which provided a much more comfortable environment for conversation and interaction. This would eventually lead to single dating and the going steady phase, where couples would exclusively date each other. In the 50s, going steady typically involved exchanging tokens of affection, such as class rings or Letterman jackets, signifying commitment. You did not want to have those returned to you because it meant you had just been dumped.
I'll call you next week.
Will you? I had loads of fun.
So did I.
Good night, Woody.
Night, Ann.
Hairstyles. Even the most progressive among us can admit hairstyles today have gotten pretty wacky. Back in the 50s, hairstyles tended to reflect the broader cultural trends of the decade, with young girls favoring curls, updos, and ponytails, while boys opted for greasy, slick-back looks or clean-cut styles. Of course, for the first time, the influence of Hollywood stars like James Dean led many teens to adopt similar hairstyles. Boys' hairstyles complemented their fashion choices, enhancing their cool, tough guy image. There were even greaser girls who embraced a more rebellious look with their hair down and pulled back.
Far away, squinting, it looks good, but it looks good.
Classic cars. The 1950s were a golden era for car culture, especially among teenagers who saw cars as symbols of freedom and independence. As the supply of used cars increased, more teens were able to own their own vehicles, often working after school or during the summer to afford them. This era also saw the rise of hot rodding, where teens would modify cars to enhance their performance and style, making them faster and cooler. The 1957 Chevrolet convertible quickly became an iconic choice. Beloved for its sleek design and powerful engine, it was perfect for cruising and drag racing, as well as parking at Lover's Lane or drive-in. No doubt, if you saw one today, you would ooh and ah over it. Other activities. Teenagers in the 1950s enjoyed a variety of activities that reflected their growing independence and social lives. Diners and soda fountains were popular hangouts where teens could gather, sip on milkshakes, and listen to the latest hits on jukeboxes. Board games were another staple of teenage entertainment, providing hours of fun and friendly competition. Games like Monopoly, Scrabble, and Clue were popular choices, just as they are today. When it came time to go out, pool halls and bowling alleys were also favorite destinations, offering a mix of leisure and competition that appealed to the adventurous spirit of the era. In fact, it's theorized that bowling alleys reached the pinnacle of teen popularity in the 50s before returning yet again to the domain of balding men and unhappy marriages. After school and summer jobs. In today's economy, you'd be hard-pressed to go long without a job, but in the 1950s, after-school and summer jobs were less of a necessity and more of a strategy. Unlike previous generations who primarily focused on school and family duties, 1950s teens enjoyed the freedom to earn and spend their own money. This shift was a significant cultural change, as it allowed teenagers to participate more actively in the consumer economy. Common jobs for teens included pumping gas, which back then involved a lot more than just filling the tank. Teens would mow lawns, flip burgers, or work as ushers or valets. Young women, on the other hand, tended towards retail jobs and typing. The disposable income earned from these jobs allowed teenagers to buy things for themselves, from clothes and records to cars and entertainment. In fact, all this newfound financial independence played a crucial role in shaping the teenage identity and lifestyle of the 1950s. Slang terms. The 50s were a time when teens were eager to separate themselves from their elders. It was also a time when people from different backgrounds and places collided with much more regularity. Both of these facts are fertile ground for slang. Many of these expressions reflected the attitudes, values, and lifestyles of the era, providing teens with a unique vernacular that set them apart from previous generations. Some of these terms have endured, while others have faded, but all contributed to the vibrant tapestry of 1950s youth culture. Expressions like dig it, to like or agree with something, and chill out, to relax, were commonly used to convey approval or a laid-back attitude. Phrases such as buzz off, to go away, and beat it were direct ways of telling someone to leave. Chick referred to a cool female teenager, while cat described her male counterpart. Being cool or hip was highly valued, while being called square was an insult to be avoided. Hipsters were those who were in tune with the latest trends and styles. Cheerleaders were called paper shakers, and a party pooper was someone who wasn't fun to be around. In other words, being around them was not a gas. Romantic relationships also had their own lingo. Backseat bingo, well, do we have to explain that one? We already talked about going steady, but if things ended poorly, it was a one-way trip to Splitsville. These slang terms not only captured the spirit of the 1950s, but also helped teenagers forge an identity that was distinct from the adult world. Whether they're still trending or not, they remain a fascinating glimpse into the language and culture of a bygone era. And there you have it. If you enjoyed this video, watch another one. Here's another video about the 1950s.